It is a great honor to be here with all of you at ESRI's Leadership Conference in Australia. I especially want to thank Jack Dangermond for inviting me here. Jack, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your insights. Jack was teaching me about the power of smart maps for better governing probably about 8 years before I ever met Jack Dangermond, just by the work he has pioneered and advanced. It's wonderful to be here in your country. You really have a tremendous, generous, wide, open, and beautiful nation. Last time I was here was 15 years ago for your Olympics. You all did an outstanding job hosting the Olympics. I was here with the mayor of Washington. The two of us witnessed one of the worst basketball matches, one of the worst basketball matches I'd ever seen in my life. But you hosted a great Olympics. I forget who the two teams were. I think it was Lithuania and Angola. And Mayor Williams from Washington had a very dry sense of humor when the audience was watching the back and forth without a single point being scored for 20 minutes. In the middle of the appalled silence, Mayor Williams shouts at the top of his lungs, "Let's go, Angola!" And the Australian people laughed. Well, I've also enjoyed meeting a delegation from Papua New Guinea and their minister just a few moments ago. Yesterday, I had occasion to meet with Minister Dominello, saw the real-time map that he's created of people filling up at the petrol stations, being able to see what the pricing is and supply and demand in a dynamic way. Also met with some other folks in your entrepreneurial governments talking about the renewable energy resources map they've created. So all of this is really exciting, cutting edge, and very cool stuff. Let me share with you a little bit about my story and what it is I think I've learned. Many years ago, the great Robert F. Kennedy said, in a quote that adorns quite a few plaques and office spaces to this day, he said, "It is from the numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a man stands up for others or strikes out against injustice, he sends forth a tiny ripple of hope." Well, that was true when he said it. But today, the diverse acts of courage and belief are no longer numberless. We can actually number them. What's more, those tiny little ripples of hope, we can actually measure those ripples now as well. Our Earth is a progressing biological system that actually reaches cognition in all of us, in humankind. And in our own time, I'm talking this generation of our species, aided by new information and communication technologies, our entire planet is coming together around a shared consciousness, a consciousness in search of greater understanding. Understanding made possible at massive scales by the dawn of the digital age and technologies like the internet and geographic information systems with profound implications for democracy. Collaboration is the new competition. To openly share the knowledge of lessons learned, to accelerate new iterations and further improvements, to bring solutions to scale. Two key developments have now dovetailed to make collaborations like ours impactful in ways never before possible. One is improvements in our ability to model belief space. As surface dwellers, there is no space more important to us than the surface of this place where we live. The other is the ability to uplink individual efforts, individual events to the cloud. Period. Full stop. Let me show you what I mean. This is a map I've been teaching at Georgetown in the mornings on Monday. I live in North Baltimore with my wife and kids, at least the one that's still left at home, my wife and kid. That's the sort of commute that when you tell people, I have to go from North Baltimore to Georgetown in the morning, they say, oh, you can't get there from here. So every day, I get in and I take out the trusty iPad. I plug in the coordinates of Georgetown where I'm going. I punch it in. And this voice on the iPad will call her Mary. Mary tells me a different way to go every day. Now, this route seems pretty direct, but some days it's a different route. And all of that is informed by other individual actions in real time, dynamically on that model of belief space, namely the surface that I have to traverse to go from Georgetown to Maryland. Belief space. Of course, the ability to model belief space now in real time and to do so with probabilistic certainty is a pretty big deal. This is not, of course, a substitute for imagination, far from it, but it is an accelerant to human imagination. All of humanity will face challenges in the 21st century, providing jobs, providing opportunity, food, water for a growing population, confronting health and security threats, arresting climate change. And none of these challenges can be successfully met or overcome without governments that actually work. And yet creativity and imagination aren't often things we associate with government, right? Not typically anyway. But together we need to change that reality and change it quickly. In other words, what if we actually understood what we can actually understand? You know? What if we only knew what we actually know? What if we took different actions and made different choices in light of that understanding to achieve better, more life-giving results? And so I want to share with you some thoughts and stories as a former big city mayor elected at a very troubled time in our city's history, and a former governor of a state in the United States, about this new way of governing that I see rapidly emerging in this information age, kind of embraced all across our country anyway, most profoundly in cities, but I see it kind of emanating up and out from cities. I want to talk with you, in other words, about getting things done. You and I find ourselves living in a moment between times, a hinge of history. The old ways of governing, ideology, bureaucracy, and hierarchy, are fading away. And a new way of governing is emerging. And it calls for a new way of leadership really at every level. It's not about excuses. It's not about moving left or right. It's about progress. It's about getting things done. And the characteristics of this new way of governing are fundamentally entrepreneurial, collaborative, performance measured, interactive, and visible in ways that all for the first time can see. In other words, the map, that common platform of human and collective endeavor, the map. Essentially, that platform that everyone can view because of the internet, that make the systems of our self-governance for the first time open and visible to all. Once upon a time, not very long ago, the only place of situational advantage, for an effective leader to be was high atop this pyramid of command and control, right? All of the information was tightly held, people followed orders, and things got done according to the rule of because I said so. But now in the information age, there's no longer that situational advantage over information, is there? The great Shimon Peres, now of blessed memory, once said to me, a group of us were visiting him in Israel. He said, in the information age, people actually know more now than their leaders. And usually they know it before their leaders. So the only place of situational advantage, if you want to call it that, for a modern leader to be effective is now in the middle of that emerging truth. in the middle of that emerging truth, where the information is shared and the leader sits and convenes collaborative circles for deeper understanding and answer to the question, what are we doing that's working? How can we do more of it? And what does the emerging truth tell us about what's actually going on? In an age where information can be mapped and shared by all in an instant, the new rule of getting things done is the authority of, because I can show you it works. In other words, this is a movement from hoarded information to democratized, from command and control to empowered collaborations. And it's not about division. It's not about specialization. It's about integration, right? Integration of the whole. A number of months back when I was in Redlands at Esri's campus there, I shared this with Jack and Dangermond, and he immediately pulled up his own version, created separately, showing the shift in technology and GIS to web-based GIS. Does that mirror the shift in leadership, or does it perhaps maybe portend the shift in leadership? I'm not sure, but there's obviously a shift that's happening both in technology and in leadership, and we hope this leads to greater citizen engagement, right? At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Deeper understanding of the challenges we face as one people on a finite planet. And the hope is that better technology, better governance, deeper understanding will make it possible for every citizen to effect positive change. Now, I would imagine the fact that you're here on this sunny afternoon in beautiful Sydney, Australia, at the Opera House. And by the way, I was very psyched to tell my wife, honey, I'm playing the Opera House tomorrow at Sydney. So maybe we'll do a song before I leave so we can make it legit. I imagine that many of you already worked in organizations, right, with GIS. How many of you work for government? Yes, some of you work for government. And I would imagine if you work in government and you have an understanding of these tools, that occasionally you're disappointed, frustrated. Sometimes you get downright angry that you understand the power of this, but you can't convince the people that run your organization to elevate it, to make it part of how the whole enterprise goes, right? Do we get an amen here? Yes? All right. Well, take heart, Australia. I want to tell you a true story about this is a true story about a man who proves that one person can make a difference, and each of us must try. I'm talking about a 5'4", slightly rotund, roly-poly subway lieutenant of the New York City transit system. And this guy figured out that if he plotted on paper with little colored dots where the crime was happening in his part of the subway system, he could deploy the people within his small span of command to those places and prevent and solve and suppress crime. Soon, what he called his maps of the future were making him renowned within the Transit Authority Police. Soon, it landed him on the cover of the New York Times Magazine, and that made him catch the eye of the head of the entire NYPD, 30,000 police officers. And Bill Bratton lifted up this little subway lieutenant and made him the deputy commissioner of police for the whole NYPD. And soon, this man, whose name was Jack Maple, started moving those maps of the future away from paper and colored markers to acetate and overhead projectors, and one day stumbled backwards into a software conference somewhere in Manhattan and discovered Esri, discovered ArcGIS. And when he went back and told the folks at the department he'd like to buy this software, they said, we already have it. But nobody was using it. Soon, Jack made his maps of the future real time. He put them at the center of a new process, and a revolution in policing was born in the United States of America. It was called CompStat. Deploy the cops on the dots to where the crime is happening. Bring people together in a timely fashion on a rotating, predictable basis. Make people run plays, solve crimes. And soon that was revolutionizing cities and city police departments all over the United States of America. I remember back before he did this, they were doing movies about New York, titles like Escape from New York. A big wall built around it because people thought it was hopeless. They'd never be able to do anything about crime. But soon they were saving lives. They were showing other cities how to do it. And one of those cities was mine. When I ran for mayor in 1999, our city had become the most violent, addicted, and abandoned city in America. There was also this kind of hopelessness, the sense that, it's just the way it is. We're always going to have a high murder rate. That's just the way it is. But we ran a campaign about justice and injustice. We pointed to what they were doing in New York. If they can do it there, we can do it anywhere, including here. We talked about double standards of justice, especially around race, about the need to police the police if we're going to improve the police, and about doing it with openness and transparency. When I was elected in that race, I had ended up being like a 3-person race. Both of my opponents are African American. The city of Baltimore is majority African American, then and still is now. Then as now, I was and am white, and the Washington Post actually ran a headline the day after my long shot come from behind election. I began at 88 days out with 7% of my neighbors saying they were for me. But we ended up winning every single council district. And the Washington Post greeted my election victory with the headline, "White Man Wins Mayor of Baltimore." The next day they apologized for, ironically, a headline that was 100% accurate. And in fact, that was the first and the last time they ever apologized in the Washington Post to me. When I went to a transition meeting, Mayor Schmoke set up each of the department heads to talk with me. I went into a meeting with the head of Public Works. And from my service on the council, I understood that the fleet of cars and trucks was a big issue, was a big expense. And so I said, Mr. Director, how many trucks and cars does the city actually own? And he looked back at me and he said, 6,500? And I said, 6,500? And he said, 6,000? And I said, 6,000? I mean, this isn't a quiz. I don't know. And he said, well, that fleet thing, every organization has some weaknesses, and we just never really figured out how many cars and trucks we actually own. Now, a more rational person, a more sane person might have run out of the building and said, I was just kidding about the mayor thing. But that's the way government had always been, right? The tyranny of that's the way we've always done it. Nothing about it was timely accurate. Nothing about it was information shared by all. Things got done on the basis of inertia, if you want to call it that, sometimes momentum, not usually. So we set out to change all of that. We not only brought Jack Maple's system of CommStat into the police department, but we took it enterprise-wide. We found that same Department of Public Works already had the best map, and so that became our common platform. We made all of the other departments start landing on that map, and CityStat was born. The tenants of CityStat are the same as the tenants for CommStat, and when we went to the state level, they became the same as the tenants for StateStat. And they are. Timely, accurate information shared by all, rapid deployment of resources, effective tactics and strategies, relentless follow-up. Every 2 weeks, 14 departments came by in a succession, a wheel of accountability, if you will, executive focus on the common platform and the map, and that compelling scoreboard that told us who was winning, who was actually doing the best and leading their pothole crews forward, or the trash crews, or whatever it might be. We were able to accomplish some meaningful, visible, powerful things. Not only cleaning up alleys, not only reducing violent crime, but we held managers accountable. We promoted talent. We threw out stale policies. We pushed innovation. We lifted up the leaders. We put 311 on the front end of that common platform and that method of constant collaboration and questioning. And 311 became the single phone number that all our citizens would call to ask for city services. People in poor neighborhoods got the same 48-hour pothole guarantee that people in wealthy neighborhoods called. And the public trust in one another and in our government started to rise. Small things done well made bigger things possible. In 2001, the Innovations in Government Award from the Kennedy School was awarded to us in Baltimore. We found a new and better way of getting things done. And today, almost every big city in America, while they call it by their own brand name, is operating in this way. And those that don't are realizing they should be. Let me tell you one story. I know we have some people here from justice and public safety. This was our huge issue. You know, this was the thing we needed to show we could actually make some progress against. In 2000, when President Clinton helped us with 200 additional police officers coming to Baltimore, we had a decision to make. And it was a decision about where to put them. Now, some argued that if we wanted to be fair, we would deploy them equally to the 6 council districts, right? That's one way to do it. Others said, if you want to be smart, you deploy them to the districts where people vote in the greatest numbers. And still someone else on my staff said, if we want to be really smart, we deploy them to the places where people voted for you in the greatest numbers. But I'm not that smart. So instead, we looked at the map. We looked at where, in 2 kidneys of concentrated death, the greatest numbers of our citizens were being shot, robbed, mugged, and murdered. Year in and year out. They also happened to be the areas where the open-air drug markets had been allowed to proliferate unchecked for decades. And that's where we deployed our police officers. And we put Baltimore on a path to achieve the biggest reductions in crime of any major city in America over the next 10 years. Didn't make her perfect. If you stop pushing the rock up the hill, it will roll back down. But we figured out what had worked. And our city wasn't the only city to figure it out. Many other cities followed that same methodology. The 3 cities that achieved the biggest reduction in violent crime over those 10 years, from 2000 to 2009, were number 1, Los Angeles, number 2, New York, and number 3, Baltimore. That's just on the violent crime. We were number 1 in Part 1 reduction. A couple months ago, I came across this slide. I have expropriated it to share it with you, which I got from the NYPD. And this is how they describe the evolution in their own organization just in the last 5 years, from 2012 to 2017. From being an intuition-based organization to being evidence-based, from being query-based to alert-based, from stovepiped information shared by all, from map making to analytics. And I would submit to you, if you look at that map and you're part of this evolution in your own organization, you've seen that same development. This new way of governing, of course, isn't just for cities. It also can work at the state level. Though admittedly, and I say this with the freedom of having now been a former governor and a former mayor, mayors learn more quickly what works than governors do. This new way of governing is not just for cities. When Jack Dangermond and I were together at a National Governors Association meeting a few years back, Jack knew that one of my colleagues, former mayor of Philadelphia, current Governor Ed Rendell at the time, was a leader in our nation on the need for investments in infrastructure. And sadly, tragically, we had just had a whole lot of moms and dads killed when a bridge in Minneapolis collapsed. It was structurally deficient. Everybody should have known it was deficient. We should have repaired it beforehand, but we didn't. Lots of people died. So Jack said to me, look, I have this great new smart map, an app I want to show to Governor Rendell. Can you get me a meeting with him? And I said, well, Jack, what you have to understand about Governor Rendell is that, like a lot of former mayors, he has an attention span that's about 20 seconds long. So if I shove him into a corner, the clock is ticking. Jack said, I'll take it. So I grab a reluctant Ed Rendell, push him into a corner. Jack flips up his screen, and he says to him, this is a map of all of the bridges in the state of Minnesota. The green dots represent the bridges. Next one. These next map, the dots have been color-coded. The green are the strongest, most structurally sound bridges, and then down through yellow, orange, into red, the most structurally deficient and weak bridges. Boom. Third click. Now I have blown up, Jack Dangermond says, the size of the dots so that you can see targets emerge as to how many souls cross over these bridges, each one in relative size to the other, so that the targets emerge. And he said, now, Governor Rendell, I'm going to show you where the federal dollars for fixing these bridges land. And with that, boom, he hit the fourth slide. And Governor Rendell said, none of the dollars are landing on the targets. And Jack said, no, but they're all landing on the map. Our challenge, right, is to figure out not only where the targets are, but to apply human effort to where the targets are, to land the dollars on the map. When I was elected governor of Maryland in 2006, we created StateStat. And we showed that this new way of governing could be used to attack almost any problem. And it was also at a much larger scale. There were some that said, oh, that works great for picking up trash or for crime, but you can't do it on a state level because, things are it's more complicated. Yeah, it is. All the more important does that map, that common platform become. So we set out to eradicate lead poisoning of children. We didn't succeed in eradicating it, but we did cut it by 90% by running plays, by using the common platform, by gathering people around the map, asking the question, what works? We did the same thing on infant mortality, drove infant mortality down to record lows. We looked at where the spikes were happening. We asked why. We deployed human effort to human problems. We set out to eradicate childhood hunger. We saw that in our schools. We put the dots on the map, color-coded them to show us where were the schools where children who were eligible for free and reduced lunch and breakfast were getting lunch at this level, but we're only getting breakfast at this level. How do we cross that delta? We also created a common platform for health. So we have moved all 46 of our acute care hospitals away from fee-for-service and into global payments. We've aligned, with the help of technology and the common platform and the map, we've aligned the profit motive to wellness rather than how many bed nights of sick people can you keep filled up. And it's actually working. I'll be damned. Chesapeake Bay, unlike Sydney Harbor, which gets flushed out by the sea, Chesapeake Bay is the longest, and I will add a very shallow estuary, largest estuary in North America. Because of the huge population growth on the western shore, as well as the heavy agriculture on the eastern shore, the health of the bay had been declining for years. We set out to change that. We created a program called BayStat. We measured actions across a suite of 36 different actions, from upgrading our sewage treatment plants to expanding the number of acres of cover crops we plant. We started measuring against 2-year timelines, 2-year milestones, these actions. We got the other 5 states that cover the Bay watershed to do the same thing. Instead of having a 40-year hope to clean up the Bay, we had 2-year plans. We could all be accountable to whether or not we were hitting the goals. We gathered people collaboratively, regularly around the map. And last year, the waters of the Chesapeake Bay were the healthiest they have been since 1985. When we first started down this path, my environmental secretary said I wouldn't set a goal and I wouldn't set any deadlines on it. I said, why? She said, because water cleanliness and water health takes a long time. I said, well, hell, we better start right away, you know? It's amazing what people can do when the leader sets the goal and brings them together, when they have that common platform, when they start seeing that they can actually achieve the results. This is an example of Maryland's green print. Esri helped us create this. It took us, what was it, Jack, 4 years or something to uncork the various data sets, many of them in federal hands, that allowed us to do an ecological ranking of every parcel left in our state for its ecological value. Either it's buffer for a stream or contiguous habitat or other things. Our state has developed more land in the last 35 years than was developed in the first 350 years. We now are able to show all of our citizens, we shade it dark green, light green, show them by way of the stars which ones we preserved with their dollars for program open space. And a word about scale. The beauty of this technology, GIS, the cloud, the tools that we now have, is that those tools, unlike human imagination, are totally unintimidated by scale. It scales up quite nicely. And in fact, Esri earlier this year made available to the whole nation those same data sets. Every state in our United States can now create its own green print, show its people where the land is that we need to defend and protect, either through zoning or open space, so that we can preserve the other living systems upon which our lives depend. So you get the point. This is a renewable energy map of the U.S. Scale. Look, I'll leave you with this final story. Back in my early days as mayor, we used to do 1 week a mayor's night out, where I'd be in the community, gymnasium or cafeteria, and the other weeks we'd do mayor's night in, and we'd invite neighbors inside City Hall to see the new city stat room. You know, permanent seating areas, the collaborative circle, department heads sit over there with their command staff, the mayor sits here. We'd fill up the gallery, and neighborhood leaders would come in. And I'd start clicking through things that at the time were new. Our kids, of course, don't think they're new. Our kids think we're pretty lame to think this stuff is still new. But at the time, it was new. So I'd start showing that we can see where the water main breaks are citywide. We can see where the notices of vacant houses are citywide. We can see the calls for 911 service citywide. We can see many things. And for the first time, we can see them all citywide. Invariably, you know, whether the neighborhood leaders that we're in happen to be from a black neighborhood or a white neighborhood or a wealthy neighborhood or a poor neighborhood, inevitably, every meeting, someone within the first 10 minutes would raise their hand and ask, "Can you show me my house?" Right? It's an interesting question. Sometimes it didn't come off as a question. Sometimes it came off as more of an indignant demand. "Can you show me my house?" You know? Why is it that people would always ask that? Was it to understand the forces around them? Was it to see that they are in fact seen, recognized, that yearning that each of us have as individuals, that they're actually recognized by their own government? Was it to understand their connection, not only to their government, but to their neighbors and the other forces around them? I think it was probably all of those things. And I think it's also something more. You know, the freedom of Exodus was not just a freedom from oppression. It was a freedom for full participation. All of you in this room have the talent and you have the skills and you have the ability at this critical time to allow us to see each other more clearly. Technology, GIS systems, the internet, these are not the ends in and of themselves, but rather the modern tools of a new beginning as we enter a new era of public service, of deeper understanding, the beginning of a new and better way of governing, solving problems, getting things done, a crowdsourced healing on a massive scale, led by cities, powered by individual effort, united by shared understanding. There is no independent salvation on this planet, for truly, the way we treat the earth affects all people, and how we treat one another is reflected in how we treat the earth. Thank you all very, very much.